Welcome back to Funeral Potatoes and Wool Mittens, a show for people who embrace the warm and cozy spirit of the Midwest. I'm your host, Stacy Mergenthal. On today's show, I'm sharing a few of my favorite breakfast dishes that I make when we have overnight guests. All the recipes I talk about today are on my blog, randomsweets.com. So let's get started before the alarm clock goes off in the morning. We're in the middle of a 3-day blizzard warning in Minnesota, with visibility down to 0 at times. And we just had a snowstorm last week. And because of that, and the fact that I didn't plan ahead far enough to already have recorded the few podcast episodes that I wanted to with my family, my dad, sisters, and mom, I'm going solo again today. You see, for my family especially, I want to record those episodes with them in person. And we've only been able to travel a few days over the past couple of weeks. So I'm recording at home today, solo, and it's quite possible that you can hear the wind howling outside my window right now. We don't have Houseguests this year for Christmas, but many of you might. Some even unexpected because of the thwarted travel plans. So I thought I'd share a few of my favorite morning dishes to make when we're lucky enough to host friends and family overnight. So I'll start with the hash brown and sausage breakfast casserole that is actually one of my most popular recipes on my blog right now, probably because people are hosting family and friends. I've posted this recipe a couple of times, one for an 8x8 or a 9x9 baking dish, and that feeds about 4 to 6 people, and then a very similar recipe that fits in a 9x13 pan. And I like to double that one for a large crowd, like when we used to make breakfasts for our kids' hockey teams. Each pan, it's approximately 12 servings, and it's really a hearty, meaty, cheesy meal. What I like most about this recipe is that you can prepare and assemble the ingredients the night before and bake it in the morning. So you just set it in the refrigerator, then it's just ready to bake in the morning. And it's kind of nice because when we fed the hockey teams, I think we had to serve them at 7 o'clock in the morning. So if I was double baking in 2 pans, they had to go in the oven by, 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. So I would make it up the night before and bake it in the morning. And although this recipe is for a sausage bake, the recipe is adaptable to any meat as long as it's fully cooked first. So you could use a cooked bacon or ham or whatever you like, Canadian bacon maybe. And I've also diced up leftover pork chops that I've had the night before and then used them in a breakfast dish in the morning. And if you're a vegetarian family, you can skip the meat and just load up on vegetables. The cheese that you use is also up to your preference. I typically use a extra sharp cheddar. Pepper jack is a really good one too. I haven't used our smoked cheese because I haven't had it on hand yet when I've made it, but I plan to try that in the future to have smoked cheese in our breakfast egg dish in the morning. Okay, so for the hash brown potatoes that you use in this dish, I always use frozen shredded hash browns, simply because that's my preference, but you can use the diced potatoes, frozen potatoes, if you like, or if you run into a problem that I found this week, which was trying to find the frozen shredded hash browns. 2 of the stores that I had been shopping at in Sioux Falls, they're completely out of any brand or size bag of shredded hash browns. And my sister Callie said that they were out at Hy-Vee and Brookings a couple days ago too. My daughter and I, we found a few large bags left at Sunshine Foods in Sioux Falls the day we were looking. So I'll be able to make the funeral potatoes or cheesy hash browns that I need to for our family Christmas this weekend. And of course, it's always an option to shred potatoes into hash browns myself, but I've never prioritized time for that. The next breakfast egg bake is a little different because you use a box stuffing mix, like a stovetop. And there are no potatoes in it. This ham and cheese stuff and puff is a baked mixture of eggs, sour cream and milk, fresh broccoli, or any vegetable you want to use. I've used celery before as well. The stuffing, and ham and cheese. The house smells so good when you're baking this that if your guests aren't out of bed yet, they will be once they start smelling this in the oven. And speaking of making your kitchen smell good, okay, so these next 9 recipes I'm going to share are sweet, and you'll make a point to serve them warm from your oven. We'll start with the butterscotch cinnamon chip muffins. I created the recipe a couple years ago, and right now I would say it's my favorite homemade muffin recipe. I just modified our what's already a family favorite butterscotch muffin recipe, and that's on my website as well, but I just added cinnamon and then cinnamon chips, which add these little tiny pockets of warm butterscotch cinnamon. The only cinnamon chips that I've seen are a Hershey's brand, but I'm guessing there are other brands too. I highly suggest, making a few jars or containers of the muffin mix, the dry ingredients. That way you can just make these muffins on a whim when you have a guest, or if you want to just make them for yourself, because the only wet ingredients that you need to add to them are the eggs, water, vegetable oil, and vanilla. And then here's a little tip that my sister shared with me a long time ago from the restaurant industry, is to just spray a little bit of cooking spray over the tops of the muffins in the pan before you bake them. It gives them that nice little flaky crispness on the top of muffins that you don't really get at home, but we get in a bakery. So moving on to everyone's favorite, monkey bread. Although mine is a butterscotch monkey bread. And for those who don't know what monkey bread is, we cut biscuit or bread dough into bite-sized pieces. So we use like the tubes of refrigerated Pillsbury buttermilk biscuits or frozen and thawed bread dough and cut them into like bite-sized pieces. We roll them in a mixture of cinnamon and sugar, place them in a Bundt pan, and then pour a caramel sauce that we've melted brown sugar and butter over the top and bake them. Then you turn the Bundt pan upside down and lift it off, and you reveal this hot, sticky ring of caramely bites like mini caramel rolls. But with mine, with just a small box of the Cook and Serve butterscotch pudding mix, you add that to the sugar and the cinnamon that you roll the dough in, and you just add this flavor that's a little bit unique to most other monkey breads. I mean, other people do this too. I'm not the only one, but sometimes it's a little bit different than what you're used to. I've tried wrapping and freezing leftovers on this monkey bread, well, on any monkey bread, but I didn't really like it. So let me know if you've had success with this, but I think we've only had leftovers once, so I haven't really had to worry about leftovers on monkey bread. And if you look on my blog, there's also a recipe for that for a serving of like one or two, because sometimes you're just one person or maybe two people. And if you use little mini Bundt pans or little pans, you can actually downsize this recipe and have it without having a huge Bundt pan full of it. And speaking of using refrigerated biscuit dough, did you know that you can make mini cinnamon sugar donut holes at home? Kind of like the mini donuts you get at the fair. I learned this from my sister Heidi's mother-in-law, Judy. She would cut each biscuit into 3 pieces, roll them into balls, fry until golden brown in about 3 to 4 inches of hot oil, and then she would take them out with a slotted spoon and then immediately roll them in a mixture of cinnamon and sugar. So you'll have instant mini donuts at home. Now, coffee cake. So coffee cake is a nice alternative to serving muffins for breakfast. These are my 3 go-to recipes that I usually bake in a Bundt pan, but you can bake them in a 9x13 cake pan. The traditional or basic cinnamon coffee cake starts with a boxed yellow cake mix. All you need to add is sour cream, eggs, canola oil, brown sugar, and cinnamon. And the icing for the drizzling over the top is really just a simple mix of powdered sugar, milk, and vanilla. So the next 2 coffee cakes, these smell so good. They start with 1 cup of pure pumpkin. So not pumpkin pie mix or puree, it's pure pumpkin. The pumpkin streusel coffee cake is from verybestbaking.com. And the other recipe is pumpkin butterscotch coffee cake. So both cakes contain a cinnamon streusel, but the butterscotch cake has an extra step, which is to melt 1 cup of butterscotch chips that you stir into the cake batter. And it's really worth the extra 10 minutes or so it takes to add that butterscotch flavor into the pumpkin. So I also want to share with you a cake that I have been known to serve for breakfast, and no one seems to get mad about it. It's amaretto pistachio cake. It's one of the most delicious Bundt cakes I've eaten, and it surprisingly only has a few ingredients. And of course, it starts with a box of yellow cake mix, instant pistachio pudding mix, water, amaretto liqueur. I use Di Serono, but you could also substitute almond extract, eggs, and vegetable oil. And then the icing is just a quick blend of powdered sugar, softened butter, milk, amaretto, or again, you could substitute almond extract, and then finally chopped pistachios. I have frozen this one and it comes out really nicely. I do suggest not putting the icing on before freezing if you're freezing the entire cake, but if you just happen to have leftovers and it has the icing on it, that's fine too. It's just that the icing gets a little bit cracky in the freezer. But I've baked it before and then cut slices out as soon as it cools, wrap them in saran and put them in the freezer, just simply because I want just a little snack in the freezer. So let's go back to muffins. I make double chocolate banana muffins when I have brown or spotted bananas. So think banana bread, only better because you bake cocoa and mini semi-sweet chocolate chips in the batter. These also freeze well, and I've never had anyone upset when I share them. This is another recipe that you can mix up the dry ingredients and have it on hand to make with just adding ripe bananas, oil, and one egg. So this last one is a breakfast that I really like to make when we have little kids overnight. Of course, someday when I have grandkids, I envision myself making these with my grandchildren. All you need to make the cake batter pancakes is a bottle of fun sprinkles, and then the pancake ingredients like flour, sugar, baking powder, salt, eggs, vanilla, milk. And then again, it's called cake batter pancakes because you use 2/3 of a cup of yellow cake mix. Then you can top the pancakes with your favorite syrup or make the glaze with powdered sugar and a little milk and vanilla. We've come to the end of Breakfast for Houseguests. If you want them to return, make 1 or 2 or 3 of these breakfasts, and they'll look forward to their next visit. So until then, keep these recipes in your morning meals rotation. Everything I shared today is on my blog, randomsweets.com, plus the links are in the show notes of this episode. You don't need to wait for Houseguests to make these wonderful dishes for your morning. Thank you for spending time with me today. Eventually the snow will stop and the winds will die down. I'll be able to see my family again and bring you the podcast episodes I had planned on for this holiday season. Until next time, please leave me a review and rate this podcast. It helps to give it more visibility. And if you haven't already, I'd love for you to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so that you are the first to know when I release an episode. Merry Christmas and sweet wishes.